want to welcome everyone here for a very important press conference. I want to thank my colleagues in government. We're going to have to speak a little louder. I know we have a microphone, but for our members in the media and others, we have obviously a lot of folks here, a lot of folks rallying for different issues. But the only people in this building talking about what we're talking about right now are the folks who are here with me, behind me, led by our great ranker on the Energy Committee, Senator Mario Mattera. So I want to thank him for all the work that he has done. You're going to hear from Senator O'Mara, Senator Tom O'Mara. You're going to hear from Senator Rob Rolison, I think maybe Senator Borrello, but all of our colleagues who are here to talk about this issue, which is energy, which is the CLCPA and the climate policies that right now are being not only pushed, but are being enacted, that are being advocated. The New York Heat Act, which we passed yesterday in the Senate, and the real impacts that these are going to have on New York ratepayers, on energy providers, and on our workers, on the men and women who work in this space. One of the areas that still provides good paying jobs in the state of New York, but these jobs will be gone. There's no question about it. We will chase, and you know, New York is no stranger to chasing good paying jobs out of the state, which is why we continue to talk about, you know, minimum wage increases and things we have to raise. Why? Because we've chased the jobs that you can pay and feed a family and afford a mortgage. We've chased those jobs out in so many sectors, and one of the last sectors is going to be the energy space. And I've met with workers in the energy area, labor, non-labor. Bottom line is the people who put down our infrastructure, they are going to be harmed. The people who pay for that infrastructure are going to be harmed. Our ratepayers are going to be harmed at a time when all we hear about is affordability. And when I hear members of the Democratic majority say, well, it's not really that much money. Rates won't really increase that much. They're either lying or they're so divorced from how most New Yorkers live that they can actually make those comments with a straight face. But you're going to hear from somebody today, you're going to hear from my colleagues who will do a great job outlining why these policies are bad and why our policies, why our energy agenda is not only better for the environment, but it's better for New Yorkers from an affordability standpoint, from a reliability standpoint. But you're going to hear from Daniel Ortega. Now, he's not an elected representative. He's here to speak truth to power. He's here to talk about what this will mean for workers across this state, and I'm glad he is here. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over, and I want to thank all of my colleagues, but I want to thank my friend, our ranker in energy, who has done such a remarkable job at talking about this issue from a range of perspectives, but certainly from the standpoint of the men and women who go out there every day and who work, who are only asking to continue to be able to do the jobs that they know how to do so well and provide for their families, the men and women who work in the space, hardworking men and women in New York. No one stands up for workers better than the next speaker, our ranker on energy. I'm sure he's going to talk about plans and bans. I'm guessing. I don't want to steal his thunder, but you may hear about a plan and a ban. My good friend, our ranker on energy, Senator Mario Mattera.
You know, the words coming from our leader mean so much to me. You know, this is a very interesting topic. This is something that all New Yorkers have been talking about. But I want to thank Leader Orr for your leadership on this issue. I want to thank, as well as everybody, for joining with our Senate Republican Conference today to discuss the energy needs for the future of New York's residents. My name is Senator Mario Mattera, and I'm proud that Leader Orr has trusted me, the ranking member of the Republic on the Senate Energy Committee. To all my fellow New Yorkers, the Democrats are attacking our energy choices with mandates, not goals, telling our residents that they cannot have natural gas or propane in their homes and buildings. Now they are working to end the 100-foot rule with the New York Heat Act mandate. And again, mandate, end all mandates. That means the utilities won't be able to put in the needed natural gas lines for businesses or our homes free of charge to allow New Yorkers to choose to utilize natural gas and to convert from oil to clean, burning natural gas. The cost of connecting will be borne by the customer, and it is too costly, and the homeowner and businesses will not be able to afford the construction cost. This is a total attack on all New Yorkers. As I've said repeatedly, we need a plan, not a ban. This ill-conceived ban was in the Senate budget resolution last week, and the Senate passed it again yesterday, with our members standing strong in opposition. And there was a couple of members also on the other side that voted no. During yesterday's vote, I was proud to join my Senate Republican Conference colleagues to debate the sponsor to fight our residents, for our residents. We need to stop this today. It should not be in the budget, and I urge the governor and the assembly to protect our ratepayers and workers. That is simply too costly for our homeowners and businesses. This is one more step in the war on fuel choices. This will cost our residents too much and cost our workers their jobs. The governor's budget in 2023 states that New York State, by 2025, no natural gas or propane will be allowed 6-story buildings and under and residential homes. By 2029, you won't be able to buy gas appliances, including gas boilers, to replace. Appliance stores will not be able to sell these appliances or boilers at plumbing supply stores. Surrounding states will be able to supply it. This will force our New Yorkers and thousands of jobs in the plumbing industry and local stores. Is that fair to all New Yorkers, that we're going to have our residents have to go across the border to go purchase all these items and then bring them back, and then we can't even have our contractors install them because they won't allow them to do it? That is losing jobs. With this New York State Act and the governor's efforts, the job losses with union utility workers, plumbers, pipe fitters, laborers, and contractors, union and non-union world, which is hard for me to say sometimes, but still it's jobs. By most estimates, the lost careers will be 30% and a lot more, which I know my good friend will be talking about that. And when we hear from the other side, you know what they say? That's the cost of doing business. How is that being fair? When I know the person that sponsored this bill does not even have an electric car, or the building that she lives in is ran on fossil fuels. This is totally unacceptable. In my union career, I created jobs. I never worked or accepted anybody losing their jobs and their livelihoods. Approximately 50% of electric comes from transmission lines from other states. The Democrats never talk about that or have an answer when my colleagues and I ask that question. In fact, they never will answer it, because we all know it, what the real answer is. We need to cut off those out-of-state transmission lines. We need to make sure that, again, those lines are coming from us. They rely on fossil fuels, and we become more self-sufficient and self-reliant. We need to be self-sufficient, self-reliant in New York State and not rely on other states. That will protect our residents and our environment, and that is something our conference cares about doing right. I held a hydrogen tour this past fall at Stony Brook University and Brookhaven National Lab to find answers that will accomplish our goals without harming our residents and our workers. We need to invest our time and money in researching other forms of renewable energy, like green hydrogen, geothermal, thermal network, sewage heat recovery expansion, retool our existing power plants, carbon capture, nuclear, very, very important. These are good investments in our renewable energy needs that will protect workers' careers and not put an unnecessary burden on our ratepayers and their families. As I've been saying, wind, solar, battery storage is not good enough to solve our energy needs. Battery storage is nothing but an experiment. As we have seen, battery storage fires is a danger that we do not have enough to know about to bet on our future. Now companies are leaving, and with huge losses, by the way. This is another cost to all New Yorkers, because we will be paying for this. All ratepayers will be paying for this experiment. They are going to throw it back onto all of us. Now, I'm going to be turning this over to a very dear, dear friend that's been somebody that is a mentor to me, that knows about this, that we both sit on the Energy Committee, Senator Tom O'Mara.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Mattera. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the impacts of these energy plans and proposals on New Yorkers. We need affordability to be a major component of our energy going forward. We need reliability. Yes, we need it to be cleaner and lower emission, and we're all very supportive of that. And New York State has led the way and continues to lead the way in that efforts. And we need a plan, not a ban, as Senator Mattera says. Just to highlight the lack of planning in our energy sector in New York State was the closure of Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant. When that plant was closed, New York State had the lowest emissions from the energy sector per capita of any state in the country. Closing Indian Point increased carbon emissions in the New York City sector that it serves by over 40%. Just the opposite effect of where these majorities want to take us. New York State is a leader in this area. New York State consumes less total energy per capita than all but 2 other states. And our per capita energy consumption in New York in the transportation sector is the lowest in the nation. So we're leading, and we want to continue to lead. But we want to do it responsibly and rationally. New York State accounts for about 0.4% of global emissions. I've just told you how we lead in all these different sectors. The increase in greenhouse gases annually around the globe right now is 6 times New York State's total emissions. The increase in worldwide coal emissions from energy production is 2.5 times New York State's total emissions. Those are annual emission increases up against our 0.4%. So all these effects on climate change that we want to see and improve are going to be for naught the way things are going around the globe. We're a pittance in the overall scheme of emissions on the earth. And yet, the Democrats say the cost of doing nothing. And we're not talking about doing nothing. We're talking about continuing to lead, continuing to approve, but doing it responsibly and rationally so that we have an affordable energy system in New York State. New York State, in my region, that's served by NYSEG and RG&E, last fall had a rate increase improved of a cumulative 31% over 2.5 years. Part of that rate increase included $1.3 billion of infrastructure upgrades in that period that NYSEG is going to do. There's over $46 billion of infrastructure improvements already approved and ordered by the Public Service Commission that haven't even hit ratepayers' bills yet. So a 31% increase in 2.5 years with only a $1.3 billion investment thus far is just scratching the surface. You're going to add a 0 onto those rate increases for New Yorkers. And that's just going to crush any hope of affordability we have in New York State. The majorities talk about affordability. Their talk of affordability is just taking from somebody in the middle class, upper middle class, and redistributing that to the lower income brackets so that they can afford to hang on here. Well, that tax base of the middle class and upper middle class is dwindling. We've seen it from Comptroller DiNapoli's recent report with the Business Council. Those taxpayers are leaving, and they're leaving because of the lack of affordability of New York State. And these proposals that are before us, the HEAT Act and so many others, are not thought out, it's not a plan, and they're only going to make New York State a more expensive place to live and to do business. We are seeing manufacturers leave the state at a record pace across upstate, in large part due to these impending mandates on the energy sector and the unknowns. So they're just making business decisions. We're getting the hell out of New York State because, first of all, we don't know what's coming. We don't know how much it's going to cost. And no matter what we do to limit our 0.4% of global emissions is going to have no impact on the climate, but it's going to eviscerate our economy in New York State and send unaffordability through the roof. Thank you. Now I pass it back to Senator Mattera. Are you next?
I'm going to go and I'm going to introduce.
Okay.
Well, I've got to have a round of applause for just that. So come on. This is real. All New Yorkers need to understand our rates are going to be triple to quadruple the amount what's going to happen with these mandates. Goals are good, mandates don't work. There's a reason why we have over 1.5 million people in the last 4 years exited New York State to go to Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, especially Florida, Texas. And you know what? It needs to stop now. We have somebody very, very important here that Leader Ort already mentioned, but I'm very, very proud, not that this man is a union brother from Local 825 engineers, but he is a New Yorkers for Affordable Energy, our good friend, Dan Ortega. Thank you, Dan, for coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Ortega. I am the Executive Director for New Yorkers for Affordable Energy. I'm also the Community Affairs Representative for ELEC 825, the Labor Management Fund for the Operating Engineers Local 825. First, I want to thank the Senate Republican leadership, and especially Senator Mattera, Borrello, and O'Mara for reaching out to our organization and giving both labor and the business community a voice on this issue. New Yorkers for Affordable Energy is a coalition of community, labor, business, and industry leaders across the state who support greater access to reliable and affordable sources of energy for residential and business consumers. We understand the important role that natural gas plays on everyday lives, from heating and cooling our homes to powering our communities. As demand for energy continues to grow, New Yorkers for Affordable Energy support efforts to increase access to natural gas for manufacturing facility, power production, transportation, and to serve as a catalyst for job growth and support for the New York's economy and quality of life. We're happy to hear today to call for a cost-benefits analysis on the New York's climate policies and to oppose the costly new mandate, the New York Heat Act. We're here to, excuse me, the New York State Democrats have continued to put the cart before the horse when it comes to energy policy. They say future goals without having a reasonable plan on how to get there, while balancing costs to consumers, grid reliability, and policy impacts on jobs. Back in 2019, when the CLCPA was passed, it imposed aggressive climate goals on the state of New York with no plans to achieve them. Goals without affordable, workable plans to get there is a road to nowhere. Since then, Republicans have demanded answers on its cost, expressed concerns about its mandates, and questioned if the goals were realistic or achievable at all. Further, the GOP conference have unanimously opposed new energy codes and mandates such as the New York Heat Act. These policies will raise rates for at least 75% of New Yorkers, eliminate thousands of good-paying union jobs, and slap up to a $50,000 cost for ratepayers on homeowners who may be forced to transition from natural gas to electric, whether they want it or not. Everyday New Yorkers express affordability as their #1 issue. And while Democrats talked about it, 25% of New Yorkers' utility bills is made out of the taxes and fees which have been imposed by the state of New York. Moreover, in a report by the Department of Public Service, the CLCPA is already making a bad situation worse. The report shows that residential bills have increased since 2019 as much as 9.8%, and in a much larger level for commercial customers. From the construction point of view, there is a lot of money in the system to build all of the projects that we need to put us back on track to achieve our energy goal. Well, not at all. New York will not meet the 2030 70% goal. Developers are canceling projects saying that the giant subsidies that they are receiving from taxpayers are not large enough. And only 8 out of 120 large-scale projects that have been awarded by NYSERDA since 2017 have been built so far. Again, that's 8 out of 120 in an 8-year period. Passing the New York HEAT Act will be a disaster for most taxpayers. While the bill caps utility costs for 25% of New Yorkers, according to the sponsor, the money needed to continue to operate the grid will merely be picked out of the pockets of the other 75% who do not qualify to receive any assistance. This is a classic political bait and switch, where a small group will benefit while hardworking middle-class families bear the burden. Further, the New York HEAT Act would eliminate the 100-foot rule for gas service that would lead to thousands of utility workers losing their jobs. On behalf of our coalition of business and labor organizations, I want to thank Leader Orr and the Senate Republican Conference for fighting back against energy policies that are expensive, ill-conceived, and bad for our economy. We need common sense and not extreme climate ideology to lead the way. New York is based with an abundance of resources. If we plan carefully, we can reduce emissions, protect jobs, and keep costs reasonable for all customers. In order to get there, we must post our current costs, appropriately measure the costs already imposed, and stop passing mandates like the New York HEAT Act, which is only going to make things worse. Thank you.
Great job. Great job. You know, we always say this, even about our education, how important it is with our school teachers and what's happening right now with the governor's proposal, right? We all talk about that with our foundation aid money going to be lost and everything like that. Jobs going to be lost, jobs going to be lost. When are our Democrats going to realize we are losing jobs? Terrible. But I have somebody that's going to be speaking on that, a great senator. My good friend, Rob Rolison, is going to be, I know he's going to be speaking on something so important about jobs and other things. Senator Rolison.
Good afternoon, everybody. So much has already been said about this HEAT Act and what it's going to do to jobs, the economy, people leaving the state, people not being able to pay their utility bills. But you know, for me, my sort of evolution to the state Senate started as a county legislator for 12 and a half years, chairman for 6, and then mayor of the great city of Poughkeepsie for 7. And I remember, because it wasn't that long ago, I've only been here a little over a year, that we would rail against the state of New York with the unfunded mandates and pushing down from the top. Now, I get to see that in real time. I get to see and hear in debate my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that believe this is the way to go, and we got to get there today. Senator O'Mara was talking about reliability, dependability, and predictability. I go home to my district, and I have obviously lived there my whole life, so I know a great deal of people who are concerned about all this. And they say, Rob, you know, what's going on up there? Why is everything not easy to understand with what these mandates are? What is the predictability? When am I going to have to transition from this to this? Yesterday, great debate on the floor with my colleague and friend, Senator Mario Mattera, about the jobs. And it just seemed to me was like, well, you know, it's going to work out. And when you think about, and they can transition from, you know, utility workers, gas line installers to electricians and all these other things like overnight. Well, it doesn't happen overnight. And I dare say that a lot of it probably won't happen at all. And this will lead to further unemployment. We're trying to go the other way. And we've got great workers, great union workers, and as Mario said, non-union workers who are out there working every day, so we have the power and the heat and cool air and predictability that we all need. And you know, I don't think I mentioned this to Mario, but we were encouraged last year to go over to the ISO, where the grid is monitored, maintained, and controlled. It's an amazing place right across the river, Rensselaer. And one of the concerns, the questions that we asked was, how much power do we have? And how much power do we need? And obviously on some days you need more than others. But the issue and the challenge is that reserve supply, which is mandated by the PSC, is shrinking. And as we eliminate sources, that's going to shrink even farther, just like jobs. And I've had individuals in those sectors and those services say, am I still going to have a job? And my answer is, if we have anything to do about it, you will. But I don't know, because what we're hearing up here doesn't make a lot of sense in the scheme of what they want to do. And I'll end with this. The other thing that is frustrating about this state government is, like I said, you got to get there tomorrow. They pass regulations and laws, and then they find out, well, geez, we got to come back and we got to change something. Why can't we ever get something right the first time with some certainty, so we don't have to keep coming back and arguing over the very thing that they passed in the first place? So with that said, I'm going to turn this over now to a great colleague of ours, Senator George Borrello.
Thank you, Senator Rolison. Thank you, Senator Mattera, for your leadership on this. You know, I'm a business owner. Business owners need reliability and predictability. They need confidence that their government is there to support them and not to undermine them. Recently, I met with a large group of manufacturers from Western and Central New York, and they were very honest. Their number one concern is this climate agenda. Their number one concern is this conversion to electricity. Their number one concern is, how are they going to operate in New York State in the future? And their solution is exactly what Senator Mattera described. They are leaving. Senator O'Mara said the same thing. They are leaving. You know, my district, the 57th Senate District, borders the state of Pennsylvania for about 100 miles. Folks, we aren't losing these manufacturers to Tennessee or necessarily Tennessee or Texas. We're losing to Pennsylvania. Literally, we had a major manufacturer in Chautauqua County pick up and move its operations just a couple dozen miles down the road into the state of Pennsylvania. That is the future if this crazy climate agenda is pushed forward. The problem, folks, is that it's easy to push forward insane, unreliable, unaffordable agendas when you have described this as an existential threat to humanity, which is what the response always is. Well, it's going to cost us a lot to do it, but it's going to cost us more not to do it. What it's going to cost us to do it is manufacturing. What it's going to cost us to do it is the quality of life here in New York State. What it's going to cost us to do this is literally going to be measured in lives. If people do not have an alternative fuel source, like natural gas backup generators, during storms, during crises, people are going to die. That's the bottom line. But you know what? Those are just acceptable losses to the climate cult. And that's what we have here, a cult that is not based in reality, that is not based in any kind of evidentiary results, but really based on a cult that we are all going to die if we don't do this. We are not acceptable losses. The manufacturers in New York State are not acceptable losses. The people of New York State and their affordability and reliability are not acceptable losses for this climate agenda. We have to stop now. New Yorkers know it, and we, as a Republican Congress, are standing strong against this crazy climate agenda. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Borrello. I mean, we sit on the Energy Committee, and Senator Parker really, with Senator O'Mara, Senator Parker is not happy that we're there. Trust me. And I have actually colleagues from both sides go, "Wow," that when people come up to say it's a real good show. No, it's not a show. You hear the passion. You hear what's real. This is real stories. This is something so important. But before I close, I want to highlight on something that back on Long Island at a press conference. Just so you know, there is a New York State lawsuit against guess what? It's against banning of natural gas. We have plaintiffs from business, contractors, union, IBEW, plumbers, plumbing contractors, propane association, that are plaintiffs against the ban of natural gas in the state of New York. So you sit there and say what happened in Berkeley, California. Just so you know, it's against federal law, against the Constitution of the United States to ban natural gas. So far, it's been postponed once already. The state postponed it once already. So this is so important that everybody understands. This is against federal law, against the Constitution of the United States to ban natural gas. So you know what? Be aware what's going to be happening coming up soon. You know what? I say common sense. This is not common sense. As Dan Ortega said, the cart before the horse? Absolutely. We need to transition into renewable energy for our future. That's not a mandate, that's a goal. But this mandate is hurting all New Yorkers. And I just want to say, I'm so proud of everybody, all my colleagues. And just so you know, there are people on the other side. I would love everybody to go and to have a talk with everybody on the other side to say, is this not going to cost our ratepayers triple to quadruple in their utility bills? And anybody wants to see this study right here, very important study that shows that it's going to cost trillions of dollars, that right now this is baffling all Cornell professors. All Cornell professors don't realize, and they finally realize saying that this is true. So if anybody wants to see this, I could give that to them. This is data. This is very important data. So I want to say thank you again to all my colleagues. Thank Leader Ort for his leadership. And I was just wondering, is there... Well, let's talk about the whole state of New York. Not for anything, Long Island. Our grid is antiquated. Just saying that it's going to cost $270 billion to go and fix all of our infrastructure to handle wind, solar, and battery and renewable energy. Really? $270 billion wouldn't even take care of New York City's infrastructure. So you're talking about one little section. What about the whole state of New York? With Senator Barella, that would, hold on, excuse me.
There's no conference position on that at this time. However, Senator Barella and I have a position on it. And that is, these Democrat majorities, all they want to talk about is following the science. They're moving to ban fracking using CO2, which would sequester carbon emissions into the ground after pumping the gas out that is needed for all kinds of purposes. Yet they're just saying we're going to ban this without reviewing it, no scientific review whatsoever. It's just another typical Democrat knee-jerk reaction to something that's not real, and they haven't even looked into. And I would ask you in follow-up to the National Grid, $4 million, what's the impact to ratepayers from that? You don't want to see that. But let me just put this out there as far as the utilities. And we're not hearing pushback from utility companies, because they're going to build out all this infrastructure. And if you look at every rate case that comes to the Public Service Commission, there's a built-in rate of return for those utilities investors on those investments and build-out of that infrastructure. And it's about 9.5%. So utilities aren't pushing back on this. They're just going to, you're going to make us build it? You're going to make ratepayers pay for it with a 9.5% return to those utility companies' investors. That's why we're not hearing any pushback from them. But they know, and behind closed doors know, that this is not realistic, it's not feasible, and it's not going to be reliable.
I would just add to that point, we actually had a presentation to the Western New York delegation a few months ago where they actually talked National Grid, it was National Fuel, the folks from IPNI, the independent power producers, and they clearly stated this is not possible. Probably the worst part about this is if you look at how much energy we brought online, electrical generation in the last 40 years, it doesn't even scratch the surface of what we're supposed to do in the next 5 to 10 years. It's just not there. And probably the most disturbing part about it is that when you look at the conversion away from reliable forms of energy like natural gas, nuclear, and so forth, that means we have to ramp up not just renewable energy, but there's actually a section of the pie graph that's put out by the Climate Action Council that says that there is going to be about 25% to come from sources yet to be discovered. We're actually banking on stuff that hasn't actually happened, science fiction, to be able to meet those power goals. That's frightening.
We have not briefed anything on that yet. Certainly, it's a big concern. We read about it every day. The mental health of our youth is of the utmost importance, and we are certainly seeing the impacts of this social media, all kinds of it that's out there, and how that detrimentally impacts youth. How to deal with it? We're looking at ways to do that. That's one example that you mentioned, but we haven't conferenced that to have a conference position on it for you.